He humiliated his Luna for another woman, until she left forever, and never looked back. Mirabel Osei was not the kind of woman who asked for much. She never demanded expensive gifts or grand gestures. She never required constant attention or long romantic speeches. All she ever truly wanted was to be seen, to be chosen, by the one person she had given everything to. For 5 years, she believed Damien Ashworth was that person. She had met him at a mutual friend's gathering, on a warm Saturday evening. He was standing near the window, laughing at something someone had said, and when he turned and his eyes landed on her, he smiled in a way that made her feel like the only person in the room. He was charming and confident, the kind of man who filled every space he walked into. He remembered small details, her favorite color, the way she took her coffee, the name of the street where she grew up. He made her feel deeply known, and for a woman who had spent most of her life quietly blending into the background, that feeling was everything. They fell into a relationship the way some people fall into sleep, gradually, and then all at once. In the beginning, Damien was wonderful. He called when he said he would. He showed up. He introduced her to his friends with his hand on the small of her back and pride in his voice. He told her she was the most grounded person he had ever met, that she made everything around her feel calm and sure. Mirabel held those words close. She carried them like something precious. When he asked her to move to the city where he lived, she said yes without hesitation. She left behind the small apartment she had decorated carefully over 3 years, the coffee shop on the corner, where the barista already knew her order, and the network of colleagues she had built from scratch. She also turned down a job offer, a remarkable one, from a company based abroad that had reached out after seeing her portfolio. It would have been the kind of opportunity that changed a career. She turned it down with one short email, and never mentioned it to Damien. Love, she told herself, required sacrifice. This was what devotion looked like. She moved into his apartment, and slowly, without either of them naming what was happening, her role shifted. She became the one who managed the household, remembered the appointments, tracked the bills, and made sure there was always food in the refrigerator and clean towels in the bathroom. She worked her own job during the day and came home to cook dinner. She attended every event on his social calendar, always dressed well, always pleasant, always making him look good, simply by standing beside him. She was, in every sense of the word, his partner, in the quiet, unglamorous, deeply committed way that real partnership often looks. And for a while, that felt like enough. But somewhere in the 3rd year, things began to shift. At first, the changes were small enough that Mirabel could explain them away. Damien started coming home later. Not by hours, just by enough. 30 minutes became an hour. An hour became 2. When she asked, the answer was always work, always a meeting that ran long, always something reasonable enough that she felt foolish pushing further. His phone, which he used to leave face up on the coffee table, began living screen down on every surface. He carried it into the bathroom. He stepped out onto the balcony to take certain calls. She noticed these things the way you notice a small crack in a wall. You see it, and then you make yourself stop looking. The compliments stopped coming too. Not dramatically, not in a way that announced itself. They simply faded. He stopped telling her she looked beautiful. He stopped thanking her for dinner. When she spoke in group conversations, he would sometimes cut in and redirect the topic, and the people around them would follow his lead without noticing what had just happened. Mirabel noticed every time. Then came the criticism. It started with small things. Her cooking was too rich, she was too quiet at parties, she worried too much, she was too serious. Every observation was delivered with a light tone, almost casual, as if he were simply sharing helpful thoughts. But the accumulation of those observations pressed down on her slowly, and she began adjusting herself in response. She changed how she cooked. She laughed louder at parties, even when nothing was funny. She stopped sharing her concerns so that she would not seem like she was worrying too much. She was reshaping herself to fit a version of herself he seemed to prefer, and he never once noticed the effort it cost her. It was around this time that Damien began mentioning Vanessa. She was a colleague, new to his department, sharp, socially effortless, and, as Damien described her with just a little too much detail, very well liked by everyone at the office. The first mention was easy to overlook. The second was harder. By the fifth or sixth time Vanessa's name appeared in conversation, Mirabel had begun to feel something cold and quiet settle in her chest. She did not ask questions. She did not go through his phone or demand explanations. She trusted him. Or more honestly, she was frightened of what might happen if she stopped trusting him. There was a version of her life she had built around this relationship, and she was not yet ready to look at what would be left if she pulled it apart. So she stayed quiet. She stayed steady. She kept the apartment clean and the dinners warm, and her feelings tucked neatly away where they would not cause trouble. She told herself she was being mature. Later, she would understand she had simply been afraid. The night everything changed was in October. A close mutual friend was celebrating her birthday at a restaurant in the center of the city. A long table, warm lighting, 12 people, good wine. Mirabel wore a deep green dress she had bought 3 weeks earlier. She had felt good in it at the store. She felt a little less sure of herself by the time they arrived. Vanessa was there. No one had mentioned she would be. She was seated 2 chairs down from Damien, animated and laughing, wearing a confidence that took up space in a way Mirabel had never quite learned to do. Damien greeted her when they arrived, and the greeting was just a little too easy, too familiar, too warm, the kind that tells you 2 people have been spending time together in the way they haven't told anyone about. Mirabel sat down. She smiled. She engaged with the people around her. She was performing normalcy with the quiet expertise of someone who had been doing it for a long time. Halfway through the meal, the conversation at the table turned lively. Someone made a joke, and the table rose to meet it. Mirabel, feeling the warmth of the moment, said something, a small, light-hearted comment, meant to add to the laughter. It was the kind of thing she would have said 100 times before without thinking. Damien laughed. But first, he looked at Vanessa. It lasted less than a second, but Mirabel saw it. She saw the look he gave Vanessa, checking for her reaction before his own, and something inside her understood, with terrible clarity, what that look meant. Then he said it. She would carry the exact words quietly, but what they amounted to was this. Mine her the joke, a casual, dismissive comment that reduced her personality, her way of seeing things, to something the table could laugh at together. It was delivered with a smile, the way people deliver things they want to pretend aren't sharp. A few people laughed, because they didn't know what else to do. A few went very still. Vanessa smiled into her glass, and Mirabel sat at the table and felt 5 years of her life look back at her from across a dinner table and ask what she had been doing. She did not cry. She had spent enough years managing her emotions in public to hold herself together for one more night. She excused herself calmly. She walked to the bathroom, stood in front of the mirror, and looked at her own face for a long time. She looked at the woman who had given up a career opportunity, relocated her entire life, cooked dinners and planned calendars, and held everything together. And she felt something happen inside her that was not sadness, exactly, and not anger either. It was clarity. It arrived quietly, the way the most important things often do. She walked back to the table. She finished the evening. She spoke when spoken to, smiled when appropriate, and gave nothing away. On the drive home, Damien was cheerful, in a way that told her he had not noticed anything at all. That night, lying in the dark, Mirabel made a decision. She did not announce it. She did not argue, confront, or cry. She simply decided, with the calm, private certainty of someone who has finally stopped waiting for things to get better, that she was going to leave. What followed over the next 3 weeks was something no one around her would have recognized as preparation. She went to work every day. She came home. She cooked dinner and watched television, and behaved, on every visible surface, like nothing had changed. But underneath, she was building a new life with quiet, careful hands. She called her bank and opened a personal account, separate, in her name only. She reached out to her sister, who had watched the last 5 years in concerned silence, and was ready the moment Mirabel said the word. She sent an email to the company that had offered her a job abroad 2 years earlier, explaining that circumstances had changed, asking whether any opportunities still existed within the organization. The response came within 48 hours. They still remembered her work, and yes, there was a position that had just opened. She found an apartment in the new city online, arranged a virtual tour, and signed a lease using the first month of salary from her own savings, money she had been setting aside in a small amount every month, for longer than she had consciously realized, as though some part of her had always known this day would come. She packed over 3 evenings while Damien worked late. She was methodical and unhurried. She took her books and her grandmother's photographs. She took the kitchen appliances she had purchased herself. She took the small potted plant she had carried from her old apartment 3 years ago, the one that had survived the move and kept growing in a corner of the kitchen where the morning light touched it. She left everything that was his exactly as she found it. On a Tuesday morning, she carried the last of her things to her car while the building was quiet. She placed his key on the kitchen counter. She looked around the apartment one final time, not with regret, but with the steady gaze of someone closing a chapter they have read all the way to the end. She sent him one text when she was already in the taxi, pulling away from the curb. "I'm done. Please don't call me." He called 11 times before the evening was over. Then again, the following morning. He sent messages, some confused, some apologetic, one almost angry, as if her leaving were something she was doing to him, rather than something she was doing for herself. She read every message. She did not reply to a single one. Not because she was punishing him, not because she wanted him to suffer, but because she had finally understood something important. She had already given him every version of her words. She had explained herself in 100 small moments across 5 years, in the quiet way people explain themselves when they are hoping someone will notice. He had not noticed. One more message would not change that. Some explanations, she had learned, are only worth giving to people who are already listening. She arrived at her sister's home that evening with 4 boxes and a plant, and the first genuine sense of peace she had felt in years. Her sister opened the door, looked at her face, and asked no questions. She simply stepped aside and let her in. In the months that followed, Mirabel built something new. She moved abroad and stepped into the job that had waited patiently for her. She was good at it, better than she had expected, because without the constant background noise of managing someone else's comfort, she discovered how much mental space she actually had. She worked with focus. She made decisions without second-guessing herself. She built friendships with people who knew her only as herself, not as someone's partner, not as the steady, invisible woman behind a more visible man. She discovered she laughed more easily than she remembered. She slept through the night. She cooked for herself and enjoyed it. Small things, a Sunday morning walk, a good book, a phone call with her sister, felt uncomplicated in a way that daily life had not felt for a very long time. She was not without sadness. There were quiet evenings when the grief of it settled over her, not grief for Damien specifically, but for the years, for the version of herself that had been so willing to disappear. She sat with those feelings when they came. She did not rush them away, but she did not go back. Not once, not even close. Damien reached out one final time, several months later. His message was long, and in it he acknowledged, with the careful honesty of a man who has had time to think, that he had not treated her well, that he had taken her for granted, that he was sorry. She read it twice. She believed he meant it. She also understood that it did not change anything, because an apology, however sincere, is not an invitation to return. She had not left to make a point. She had not left to be convinced back. She had left because she had finally understood her own value, and that understanding was not something a well-written message could undo. She closed the conversation without replying, set her phone face down on the table, and looked out the window at the city she now lived in. The evening light was gold and soft. Somewhere below, the street was full of sound and movement. She thought about the woman she had been at that dinner table, sitting still and silent, swallowing herself whole so that someone else could feel comfortable. She thought about the potted plant in the corner of the kitchen, still growing in the morning light. She thought about how far she had come. And then she picked up her phone, called her sister, and told her about her week.